Hi there, I'm Dr. Paul Donovan, and this is a short video about the challenges of getting positions of leadership and misuses of power that often accompany those positions of leadership. In this video, I'm going to talk about why that is so often happening. It's so confusing to most of us who look at people in senior places who occupying roles with great power, yet seem to be behaving in ways which many of us just shake our head in disbelief. But why is it happening? And why has it been happening forever and a day? In this video, I'm going to talk about that and explain why it's happening and what we can do about it. Okay, so first of all, what we know is that when individuals gain status in any situation or context, so their rank improves. Let's imagine someone who's going up the levels of some organization, or maybe they're getting more political power in a party. Something happens to them as they go up those ranks. And we know this. This is the science of power. So where they start, when they're low down, they engage in a lot of behaviors which attract attention and support. They tend to be empathic. They can take other people's perspectives. They're often very civil with people. They manage their impulsivity. And so as doing that, their attention is on others rather than so predominantly themselves. And when they do that, more power is given to them and they start to get a little bit elevated. The difficulty is when we start to get elevated, something happens to us. Now, it's not just these rock and roll stars who are drug-addled or politicians who are at the top of the game. It's any of us who are in an experience, in a context where we're starting to get elevated and we have rank. Now, when that happens, the feelings of power within us start to cloud our judgment. They literally do that. Did you know, I'd want to just give you this little experiment. They've measured the fact that when you have increased sense of social rank, your empathy drops. Isn't that interesting? Let me explain to you right now how they actually determined this. In one experiment, they showed a group of people, first of all, a ladder with 12 steps, and then they showed them people who were very privileged and very wealthy, the jet setters of our world. They showed a second group, again showed them a ladder first, and then showed them a group of highly underprivileged, poor, broken scenarios of people, really marginalized people. So they showed these two groups, two different kinds of people. And then they ask each group, mark yourself on the ladder where you think you are. You with me? So the people who saw the really, really privileged marked themselves quite low because just naturally they made themselves in comparison. They compared themselves to that group, so they tended to score themselves and put a mark, where am I on the ladder of life? And then the people that they showed, the very underprivileged, marginalized people, where did they put themselves on the ladder? Because they were just naturally in comparison at that moment, they put themselves quite high on the ladder. Now, then they took both groups and measured empathy. Now you can do this, you can measure empathy. It's a standard psychological test. They show pictures of people's eyes and 4 emotions, and they ask you to determine what emotion that person is experiencing. Did you know that the people who scored themselves high, the people who scored themselves high on the ladder, they scored much lower in empathy. So when we think of ourselves as higher, when we think of ourselves as more powerful, when we have a feeling of power, we literally find it harder to read the emotions of those people around us. That's only one of the readings of empathy, but that's a critical one. The people who scored themselves lower were significantly more effective and scored higher in any readings of empathy. Isn't that interesting? I mean, it's not the only way. Did you know that they've done this in many ways in studies, where you can prime a group to feel more powerful and prime a group to feel less powerful. In one study, they asked both groups to write an E on their forehead in a way that the person who was looking at them would read it correctly as an E. Did you know that those people who felt less powerful were 3 times more likely to draw an E on a forehead backwards in a way that the person opposite them could read it. If for those of us who feel more powerful, they struggled to get into the other person's shoes and draw an E so that they could read it easily. This happens to us biochemically. It's the science of power. As we go up and get more power, our wiring is affected by the biochemistry of power. It's far more difficult to show empathy. It's more difficult to take other people's perspectives. We do more acts of incivility. We become more rude, and we become more impulsive, and we give more credence to our own point of view. These are the things that naturally happen when we start to feel powerful. So is it all bleak? Are we just left with this scenario? No, we're not. It all demands that those of us who go up in rank in any organizations, community organizations or political organizations, must do personal work. They must deepen and strengthen their awareness of their own triggers. They must build their personal power so they don't get too unaware of the effect of power on them. Because power will have an effect, but they need to outsmart this effect. This is a trap of power. They'll need to outsmart that, and the way they do that is that they've got to do personal work. They've got to really dig deep. We cannot afford to have leaders who climb in organizations who have not done the work of digging deep into their own demons, into understanding what their triggers are to make them impulsive, to make them less empathic, to take their focus away from others. And where we have people who have climbed organizations but have not kept up and doing the personal work required, we have this horrible gap. We have people near the top that have not done the adequate personal development, and then they are absolutely vulnerable to the traps of power on them. So, in summary, we must not judge too quickly those who are climbing in organizations and how their behavior becomes simply inconceivable to us at times, because they're experiencing the effect of power on them. And we likewise need to look at where we have power. When you come across a stranger, and you might see, and you're a stranger, and you are 6 inches taller than the stranger, you might be wealthier, you might be wearing better clothes, you may be unaware of this, but at that moment you have social rank, and at that moment you are very vulnerable to acting in dismissive ways. You're very vulnerable to not seeing their real face or their eyes or noticing their emotions. You are in fact affected by the traps of power. So it's not just the politicians, it's every one of us. We have rank in certain circumstances, and we need to be aware of that and make sure that we do the work that protects us from falling to the traps of power. So it's an invitation. We must demand of ourselves, and we must demand of our leaders that they live an examined life, deeply examined. And the higher you go up, the more examination you must do. The more time you have to go off on your own, the more journaling you have to do, the more coaching. And I don't mean coaching that just gets you to your goals. I mean coaching that lets you look at your shadow. This is essential for anyone who's climbing in the ladder. Okay, thanks. I hope this has been helpful, and I look forward to sharing this message with you in other places soon.